Hello, and welcome to the Simply Business Interview Podcast, a podcast created by business owners for business owners. I am your host, John Jennings. And I believe that most business owners are working way too hard for much too little. And one of our issues is that we overcomplexify things. I believe the answers are almost always within us or within our reach. I like to say that I'm a simple man with simple ideas. So welcome to Simply Business. All right, today we are joined by Vaughan Scott, the CEO of Axiom Financial Strategies Group. Really excited to get to know Vaughan here today and hear more about his business and his journey. Vaughan, why don't you start with just tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, and what you do.
Sure. No, thank you so much for having me, John. It's a pleasure to meet you, and appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. The Axiom's business is essentially, primarily in the wealth management space, if you will. We actually specialize in working with entrepreneurs and family enterprises, so we have a little bit of a unique perspective in that. Not only am I an entrepreneur, but I work with entrepreneurs and family businesses. So it's been an interesting journey. I actually the leap into this business occurred. I followed in my mother's footsteps. And actually worked for 3 of the 4 largest financial services institutions in the country. But my actual first entrepreneurial leaps were really what I would call significantly more than side hustles in launching businesses, because I was effectively bored in corporate America. Loved working with the clients, but we were so confined by so many things that we couldn't do. I had a lot of extra energy, and so channeled that into my first entrepreneurial venture. Was literally the idea in the shower. And that one actually has evolved substantially. That was 20 years ago that I had the idea in the shower, but we're getting to the commercialization phase with that solution, which is really exciting. And then my second entrepreneurial leap was actually in large measure because I work obviously in the financial services industry and have spent a lot of time helping families deal with transitions of leadership, ownership, or both. One of the things that became very apparent was that the things that matter most to families aren't necessarily the economics and the financials. Obviously, the business and the legacy of the business is critical. But there were more important things about preserving memories and preserving not just content but context around things that really matter to people. So that second venture, I call that my PhD in the School of Hard Knocks, because in 2008, which was not good timing to begin with, started to try to launch that business. And it was a cloud-based venture based in Louisville, Kentucky. Well, as you can imagine, there wasn't a lot of talent in the area around that sort of technology, but we made a good run at it. Had a 5-year run. Ultimately didn't work out, but learned a lot.
Yeah. Several things that resonate with me. One is the getting bored in corporate America, because I was there for 2 decades myself, and I created one of my first side hustles was a internet business, just doing web development, web design. Started back when we were coding in raw HTML in Notepad, like in the mid 90s, just the fact that you could create a web page was like amazing to people, right? And so people were hiring me to create them, web pages for them before it was, became easy. And then I got bored with it because it became too easy, I resonate with that. So you do a lot with family businesses, and I do too. So that's always an interesting transition. What are you finding is the number one way you're helping family businesses in the world today?
One of the things that we've done and that has been really helpful and is that we do really stress the importance of working with both entrepreneurs and family enterprises. And I call it, it's an acronym. I think I developed it I call it the EFA, the Entrepreneurial Family Enterprise. And I really, to me, it's more of a mindset than anything, because even if you're an early stage business, if you really want people to gravitate to you and to feel like that people want to feel like they're truly a part of something that matters. And so that same sort of ethos is important. More directly answering your question, the biggest challenge that I see that families encounter is that they lose the entrepreneurial spirit, especially as you get into the third and fourth generations of families. And so ensuring that the family understands the importance of taking calculated risks throughout their journey is just critical. And then also balancing, because many of the families obviously we work with in our industry directly, have developed significant liquidity and additional resources. Then it becomes about balancing the liquidity with often what I would call non-core real estate, and then also with the operating businesses, because usually it starts as one and can evolve to others, especially as families are more and more successful. But navigating all that and balancing all that is critical. In terms of helping them understand it, quite candidly, often we work with people like you, because we believe that a two-pillar approach, and I didn't come up with this, two esteemed colleagues of mine who are widely published, named Dennis Jaffe and Jim Grubman, who I've been fortunate to know for almost 20 years, published an article, long time ago, widely available on the internet, called The Two Pillars of Governance. One pillar is the family governance. So the family has to actually get along, be organized, have proper structures for the family. And then there needs to be really good business governance. And that also includes ensuring that the operating entities themselves are worth transitioning to the next generation. And that they're modern, quite candidly, whatever that means in each industry.
Yeah, cool. So Axiom, there's a lot of financials, just like there's a business coach on almost every corner, seems like there's a financial service company on every corner. So is this kind of your niche? Is this something was intentional, or did it just kind of happen?
It's a great question. It really evolved over time. I always, my first run at running a business, I actually managed restaurants, and then I went banking. So ironically, everybody thinks I learned so much from the banking industry. I didn't learn much of anything from the banking industry. I learned so much from the restaurant. No disrespect to bankers, but I learned so much from the restaurant industry, how to deal with people, and so as I got into even banking, I just was always fascinated with business owners, and ultimately I realized, I have a heritage in my family of entrepreneurs. My great grandfather on my mother's side was an entrepreneur. My grandmother on my mother's side and my grandfather on my father's side were entrepreneurs. And then ironically, their spouses really chimed in or jumped in to actually help them run their respective businesses.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I see that legacy of entrepreneurship often.
And I'm sorry, I've got the fire trucks going by. Give me just a minute. Sorry.
Okay. I didn't hear it, believe it or not.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe the filters are better. So
let's pick that back up.
So it's talking about my grandparents and and their legacy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I see that legacy aspect in a lot of business. I see it in my own. My grandfather was, was a self-employed, newspaper business and printer. And so, when I got into writing and stuff, it's like, I'm like the seventh generation that has kind of been, has done that kind of work. So that's interesting how we see that legacy play out. So how long has Axiom been around?
So Axiom as a brand, if you will, has been around since 2009. Okay. So I secured a trademark on that name back in late 2008, early 2009. And we used it at another institution that we worked with for quite some time. And then ironically, mentioning the other ventures that have been more challenging and taken a long time, we had the unique opportunity within this much larger institution. There were about 1,900 different business units that functioned within that business, and they launched a pilot program to actually help a dozen of us become independent. And this is obviously a national company.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, we were one of the dozen. So
Oh,
as much
wow.
as we struggled with the other ventures, or have struggled with the other ventures, this one we literally were able to set up and start generating revenue. Now, granted, there was a lot of work, a lot of teamwork and a lot of effort on the front end. But we literally were able to turn on the revenue, not even overnight, but over an afternoon. So very unique opportunity, especially in this
That's
industry.
awesome.
And we got to take all the data, and we got to take all our clients. Very unique situation. So
Yeah.
we've officially launched 3 weeks before COVID hit. So
Okay.
that was an interesting time to launch
Isn't it though?
as an
Yeah.
independent firm. Yeah.
Yeah. I launched 18 months before COVID, and I always tell people I had an 18-month roadmap to get to where, I wanted to be. And I hit that in January 2020, and then lost it, almost all of it, in March. It was but I think starting 3 weeks before would even be harder, because at least there were some things in place that I could rely on. Tell me more about your growth. The business landscape's always changing. Your world changes a lot. How do you stay adaptable? How do you change? How do what's your approach to remaining innovative?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's interesting because if you and I know you experience this too, especially in corporate America, there's a lot of discussions around, hey, well, maybe Vaughn's less adaptive to change, and John's more adaptive and resilient to change, and these two personalities can coexist. It's okay, both work. I think we all understand today that that is no longer a true statement. We all have to adapt. We all have to change. And so in large measure, again, in large part because of the work that I did with families, helping them transition their leadership, ownership, and or both, I started developing a framework that I've developed over the last 10 or 15 years. And effectively that framework, I call it next chapter planning. And I didn't intentionally set out to do something that actually is helpful for people to think about individually, but also for businesses to think about in their business context. But essentially the first 5 chapters, if you will, of next chapter planning are trust, relationships, responsibility. Now that's binary, meaning you have to be financially responsible and socially responsible today. Time, are we using our time effectively, and are we using other people's time effectively? And then the last is health. And people say, well, what does health have to do with business? And I'm so over people talking about cultures and how great a culture is somewhere. The people who talk about how great their culture is typically have real cultural issues that they haven't addressed. So obviously in the individual context, it's easy. We need to take better care of ourselves, and it's more challenging today because of the challenges. But I would challenge you and anybody else to come up with 5 themes that are more important for people to think about. And so I actually literally think in terms of those themes at times, when I'm taking on issues, and often more than one theme's at play. It's like, that interaction I had with that team member, did I build trust, or did I strain the trust that we have together? Right. Externally, am I building the relationship that I should? Am I making the investment in the relationship, or am I just, profit seeking in the relationship? Which unfortunately, many people who try to network and build relationships, that's what they do. I mean, great example. I think you've created, a great way to build relationships using this podcast, right? It's an innovative way to look at that, and there's real value in somebody, meeting you and having a conversation with you, versus just trying to extract something. You're giving first. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah. That's interesting. Trust is your first chapter, because that's probably an area that I hone in on with prospects as well as customers more than anything else. And I've really become an advocate of the idea that if your culture is not based on trust, you don't have a culture.
That's right.
And so every one of the groups I work with, one of the programs I work with, is all about establishing trust
in these like 8 categories. And basically their philosophy is that every cultural problem, every financial problem, every business, every sales problem, every problem at its root is in trust or lack thereof. So, if you're not selling, and I talk to my clients about this all the time, if you're not selling, it's because, and assuming you have a product worth buying, it's because your prospects don't trust what you're saying. They don't believe what you're saying as far as the value of your product. If you have people that are not showing up to work, it's because they don't trust that you've got their best interest, at hand, or they don't think you're going to care about their problems to allow them to be flexible in their time or whatever that might be. So it's interesting.
It is. And one of the things that I've certainly learned is that, and again, too often, unfortunately, and I do think some of the sort of textbook strategies that people use or try to use themselves, especially without the benefit of a coach, which coaches are critically important in my opinion. They end up creating, structures where effectively it actually erodes the trust. They're not empowering people. You have to get trust, to earn trust, you have to give it. And you have to empower people, and you have to show them that not only do you care about them, but you trust them to make good decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. I usually, whenever I do a trust, I just doing a training program for a company on Friday on trust. And I asked the question, is trust earned or given? And there's always a debate. And I'm like, it's really both. You have to give it to earn it.
That's right.
And you have to earn it in order to be able to give it. It goes both ways. And so there's things you have to do intentionally to build trust, but there's also, you have to start to give it out even in measured ways. So that's interesting.
And the other one people don't think about, as often in terms of building trust and building relationships is time. And especially, talk about trying to develop relationships, so often people have no consideration for the actual time. They get a meeting with somebody and they're so excited to finally get the meeting. They don't establish on the front end of the meeting, well, how much time have you allocated for this conversation? And then even if they get that right, they don't hold themselves accountable to that time, literally set a timer, because, that's something that busy people, especially anybody that we want to build relationships with, they are going to really appreciate and respect. And most people, especially, in the Midwest, they're courteous, they're kind, they'll give people time, and it will have to really become inconvenient for them, significantly inconvenient, before they say, you know what, I'm sorry, I need to go. But they so appreciate when somebody really holds to the time that they've prescribed. And we do. We need to be very cognizant of, and then I'm sure you deal with this too, time in terms of meetings. Almost every meeting invariably for a team is scheduled for an hour. Does it need to be an hour? Should it be 30 minutes? Should it be 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Should it be a standing huddle as opposed to an actual meeting?
Right. I'm a big fan of the stand-up. 10-minute.
Yep.
When I was in corporate, that was one of the big changes I made. I remember on my development teams, we had stand-up, 10-minute meetings first thing in the morning, and we didn't have a lot of sit down 1-hour meetings because of that, because we were staying in touch. Yeah. And I appreciate, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was late getting us started today because of, traffic and other things. So I appreciate you being, showing me a little bit of grace and running behind. Well, tell me a little bit about, you seem to have a very healthy balance within your life. You just seem to be a very cool customer, so to speak. So tell me a little bit about maintaining work-life balance in your role.
I mean, ironically, I appreciate you saying that. I would say I've struggled with that, and it's more because I'm so intellectually curious. So as I mentioned to you, I also I've run a few programs for the University of Louisville, their MBA consulting program, which was, literally worked with hundreds, did over 200 projects with hundreds and hundreds of students over about a 7-year period. In addition to the work, I do think it's being present when you're with whomever you're with. and that you really focus on that, but you really have to allocate time appropriately to be able to do that. I will say with my family, that's the one that I of course we all have regrets around that. I really was good about getting to, school functions and athletics. I wish, especially when they were younger and they were just trying to get my attention, I was working on something, that I thought was important at the time. I would have just given them some more time, but it's a work in progress, but I'm definitely getting better. And I'm being more intentional about that. And I do think a lot of it is being intentional and time blocking, which is, obviously another skill or approach that makes a huge difference for those who practice it.
Yeah. Excellent. And with that, wrap up with the question I kind of always ask some version of, and that is, because I think you and I could talk for 2 hours, but in the interest of
nobody will
our own
listen.
time,
we'll enjoy it. Nobody else will enjoy it.
Exactly. You work with a lot of entrepreneurs, you work with a lot of students. So thinking of those younger people who are thinking about starting a business, going into business, especially a family business, what's the best piece of advice you would lay at their feet?
I would say that the exciting thing is that there are so many tools, if you leverage them, that can allow people to enter businesses at fractions of the cost that it used to require. But at the same time, they never confuse that sort of luxury, if you will, with anything other than you still have to have an absolute burning desire and a really, really, really strong work ethic to even have a 50% shot today. And it's just critical. There is no substitute for hard work, long hours. Mm-hmm. And I would also say, especially in the early stages, of developing a business, seek out, there's several programs in and around the greater Louisville area, but especially around the country, for early stage businesses. Enroll in them, participate in them, embrace them, and most importantly, especially as you're doing your early customer discovery, please remember you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you need to use them proportionately.
Yeah.
No matter, the biggest benefit of the time you get from somebody that you're trying to learn more about as a prospective customer is listening, not selling.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say you have 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. So it's more like a 80-20 rule actually applies.
I like it. No, that's a good one. I may borrow that one. That's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I love, you that passion. I tell people who are thinking about starting a business, there's 3 things. You got to have the skills, you got to have passion, but the third is you got to have a product or service that people want to pay for. And that's what a lot of people, they'll go, oh yeah, this is, this is going to be a great, like, really, you really sought out some independent, opinions about that. Cause a lot of ideas just aren't that good. Maybe they can be. They just they need some honing.
Things are they should be a hobby. Maybe it's a hobby and not a business, and that's okay too. But if and don't try to turn something that is the market tells you is only ever going to be a hobby. Don't try and turn it into a business.
Yeah,
it's going to be a miserable journey.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, Vaughan, if people want to get in touch with you, maybe talk to you about Axiom or some of the services you provide for small businesses, family businesses, how should they contact you, and what's the best way to find you?
The easiest way to reach me, our website is just www.axiomfsg, F as in Frank, S as in Sam, G as in go.com. And my email address is Vaughan, VAUGHAN, at Axiom.
Okay. Axiom.
Yeah.
Excellent. So great meeting you. Great words of wisdom for small business, especially family business owners out there. So I appreciate your time today, and look forward to seeing what develops with Axiom over the coming years.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited about it. We got a lot to look forward to.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you liked it, please share or like it on whatever platform you use. You can find me on social media. On most platforms, I'm John K. Jennings. My first book is also available. Your Baby is Ugly tells you about 10 truths that business owners need to hear, but often won't, and how to overcome them. You can find it on Amazon. Just search for Your Baby is Ugly. And be watching for our next episode, where I'll interview another business owner who will share their stories and insights into what it's like to create a great business.